Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be getting ready. What time I tell you about my birth story with baby number 5, which was about 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So at my 37-week appointment, I was able to get a membrane sweep, and I was also able to schedule my induction. Now, I did not think that the membrane sweep was going to really do anything. I just thought, maybe it would help me to dilate a little bit more, since that was kind of happening pretty slow to be on baby number 5. But nonetheless, I got the membrane sweep on a Thursday at my 37-week appointment. And I also scheduled my induction for that following Friday. So it would have been like the 30th of January, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So that happened at like 9:30 something that morning. And I noticed that I was like kind of crampy and everything throughout the remainder of the day. But the contractions and stuff never picked up and never got super consistent, which was something that I was dealing with for like the last few weeks of my pregnancy this time. And I dealt with this a lot with my last pregnancy with my 4th baby. So I just went on about my normal weekend. And then on that following Monday, I did end up losing a chunk of my mucus plug. And at this point, it was just like a yellow tinged kind of mucus plug, if you will. But it was, it was pretty decent size, I would say. It was about the size of a quarter. And so I messaged a picture of it to my mom, told my husband, like, hey, I lost some of my mucus plug. It might mean that labor is near, but also it could really mean nothing. So we were just playing it by ear. Still, at this point, I was still having a lot of contractions. Once again, nothing consistent. So then Tuesday rolled around. I lost a little bit more of my mucus plug. It was still the same yellow tinged color. At this point, I'm just like, nothing is going to happen. I'm going to have to, go to my induction date, which was fine. That's what we planned for, just because this go around we had a hospital birth. So it was just a lot more to consider, a lot more people to consider. I wasn't too mad about it, but I was also still like doing my exercises, doing curb walking up and down my stairs, all the things. I was still trying to go into labor on my own, but I was getting a little discouraged until I woke up Wednesday morning, and this was the 29th of January. I had contractions. They started the night before around 10 or 11, and then they continued on until that morning. I was still having contractions. And so I got up about 6. I did not sleep at all that night. It was like a real light sleep because, like I said, I was having contractions. So I got up that morning and I went to go potty. And at this point in my pregnancy, since I was 37 weeks, I was wearing pads in case my water broke. I didn't like ruin my whole bed and everything. So I noticed that when I had went to the bathroom, there was brown blood sitting in my pad. When I wiped, I noticed there was a lot of discharge that was mucusy, but it was also covered in brown blood. And so I have never had this happen before with any of my kids. I woke my husband up and I told him, like, hey, I've got some bleeding going on. I think I need to go to the hospital and get checked out because I've never had this before and all the things. So he got up, we got our kids ready, took them to where they needed to go, and we went to the hospital to get checked out. So when we got there, my contractions were like dwindling away. She checked me, and at my 37-week appointment, she was able to stretch me to a 2, so I was 2 centimeters dilated at my 37-week appointment. But when I went into the hospital on the 29th, I was a 3. So the contractions that I was having, although they were not super consistent and they wasn't getting super strong then, they were changing my cervix. But she told me that after an hour, they watched me, checked me again. I had not progressed at all. So they sent me home. She told me that I was obviously seemed to be in early labor, and the blood that I was experiencing seemed to be my bloody show. So if I wanted to go into labor and keep things going, then I needed to go home and I needed to do all the things. How the baby got there would be how the baby would get out, to walk, to keep my body moving, and all the things. When we got home, I decided I was going to go home and take the midwife's brew to try to go into labor, since the nurse at the hospital told me to go home and do all the things to keep my labor progressing. Of course, I know that that's probably not what she meant when she said to go do all the things, but it's just what I decided to do. So I took that, and then we went outside to clean out my car. It took us a couple of hours to clean out my car, not even gonna lie. It was terrible. So I was in there, you know, getting the trash out, helping my husband vacuum it. About 1:30, I was not feeling anything. I was not feeling no contractions. I just felt like my early labor had just kind of stopped. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, the car's cleaned out. We need to just go ahead and go get the kids because nothing is happening. I'm not feeling anything. I was just ready to go get them and come back home. We got just a few minutes up the road and I felt something like come out. And I thought it was more of like my mucus plug. So I told my husband, I said, please pull over and look at this to see what it is. So he ended up pulling into a parking lot, and as we were pulling into the parking lot, I felt a gush and I was like, oh my goodness, like my water just broke. He stopped the car and I stood up. He looked at me and he was like, that is red blood, like bright red blood. Get in the car. And I was freaking out because it was running down my legs. It was everywhere. It looked really, really, really bad. So I got back in the car. I started to panic. My brain just goes to the absolute worst possible scenario ever. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm hemorrhaging. I'm possibly going to die. There's blood everywhere. And so I was like, I need to call 911. I got on the phone with 911 and I was panicking. Clearly, I was panicking. And she was trying to calm me down and figure out where we were and the whole 9 yards. So I told her, like, we're coming up the road. We're trying to get to the hospital. I'm bleeding. I'm 38 weeks pregnant. I went home, took castor oil in the midwife's brew, all the things. And then my water broke, bleeding it, you know, there's a lot of blood. And so she advised us to stop the car, to find somewhere to pull over. And luckily, we were at a stoplight and there was a police officer in the parking lot across from the stoplight that we were at. So my husband decided that we were going to pull in there and try to get some help because the ambulance was trying to figure out where we were. That way they could get to us. So he pulls into the parking lot and he jumps out of the car and is like, sir, like, we need help. We need help. He's telling him what all is going on. And immediately the officer radios whoever to let them know, you know, what is going on and that we need medical attention ASAP. And so I'm sitting there, and within just a few seconds of the officer radioing what was going on, a whole crew of police officers, investigators, the whole shebang show up. I will say, like, I do not like the area that we live in. I really don't. If you know me, then you know this to be true. But the first responders and the police officers during this whole situation was completely amazing. So the police officer that was standing with me never left my side. He was there the entire time asking me questions, trying to, keep me calm. And it really, really helped me. Like, he helped me so, so, so much. And I'm forever grateful for that. He's talking to me. He's telling me that my heart rate is fine. I look good. I'm talking. I sound good. I did not lose consciousness or any of that. So he's like, these are all good. These are all good things. Ambulance arrive. They obviously get me into the ambulance and we start heading to the hospital. And at this point, as soon as I get inside the ambulance, my contractions start. And they are coming every about 3 minutes because she is having me tell her when I'm having them. That way she can time them. That way, she can communicate with the nurse there at the hospital what exactly is going on. My blood pressure was 150/90 something. I was stressed. I was scared to death. At one point in the ambulance, I did have the lady that was riding in the back with me to look, obviously, dim my pants, to see how bad the bleeding was. We got there pretty quickly. They checked me in. I tell the doctor and the nurses, obviously what is going on. Not to say that that is what caused it. I don't believe it is because, like I said, I was not feeling any kind of anything at this point. But I wanted them to be very aware of what I had ingested. That way they could take proper precautions in case something did go wrong. They got me into triage and she checked me and she's like, well, you're still a 3, but because of the bleeding, we are gonna admit you. We get into the room where I will be delivering. The doctor comes in and sees me. And at this point, I'm crying. I'm a nervous wreck. And I'm just like, did I cause this? He is like, no, like, you did not cause any of this to happen. This is your 5th baby. That could definitely be a reason why you're bleeding so much more. Or it could be the fact that you just got checked this morning. All that factors in. But I'm absolutely not worried about the bleeding right now. She was like, if I was worried, I would definitely let you know. She said, but as of right now, I'm not worried, so you should not be worried. I'm laboring. My contractions were very consistent, and then because of how stressed out I was, they started to dwindle off. They did give me an hour to labor by myself to see if the contractions were going to actually pick up or if they would need to start Pitocin. She came in there probably like 30 minutes later, and I just knew by 1, how I was feeling, and 2, by watching the contraction monitor, I was like, y'all are gonna have to start me on Pitocin because my contractions are dwindling off again. So at that point, I told her that it was okay to go ahead and start the Pitocin and just get the ball rolling because she did confirm that my water had, in fact, broke. So if you know anything about childbirth, you can only have your water be broke for a certain amount of time before you are at high risk of infection and stuff. So we started the Pitocin and I was totally fine with it. I was going to have to get it on that product anyways. So it wasn't that big of a deal. Once she started the Pitocin, contractions obviously started to get more frequent, consistent. So those were all good factors. So during my labor process, mind you, I went all natural again because the last time I went all natural with my 4th baby, it was amazing. But this time it was so different, and I'll explain to you why. But during the labor process, I was hurting so bad in my right hip, and I could not for the life of me figure out why. So my nurse came in and she did some different positions with me, and one of them was you lay on each side, like you have to do it on both sides. So I laid on my left side first. You would have to keep your left leg completely straight, and then you put your right leg off the bed. During your contractions, she will take your hip and like kind of roll in circles. And this is supposed to help the baby to reposition. We did that 3 times and I felt a pop. And then liquid went everywhere. And so she said that was like my second bag of water or whatever that's supposed to mean. She said that's what that was that I was feeling. She had me do another position with the peanut ball where I just stick the peanut ball between my legs, lay on one of my sides for however long, and it should help the baby to reposition. And I kid you not, I went through maybe 3-4 contractions on that peanut ball and I felt a pop and I was like, ooh, like what is that? And that was the baby actually repositioning itself and like going into my birth canal. My team was awesome. I could not have asked for a better delivery team. Like they were amazing, to say the least. I also had a lot of back labor and I was trying different positions to get comfortable. So I tried standing beside my bed because due to the bleeding, I could not get up and like go to the bathroom or go get in water or any of that. I had to be monitored 24/7 just due to all the bleeding. So they did let me stand beside the bed. They let me sit on a ball beside the bed. However I really wanted to labor, I could, as long as they were able to monitor the baby's heartbeat. At one point though, I decided that I wanted the head of the bed raised up. That way I could kind of like be on all fours or just like lean over the back of the bed. I did that for basically the remainder of the time that I was in labor. And my mom and my husband took turns putting pressure on my hips to kind of counteract the pain. But I feel like I did really good actually like dealing with the pain of the contractions. I was able to breathe through them. But I did realize this time like I needed a lot more support as far as like someone talking to me. So like when I would have contractions, my nurse, she was basically in there with me the whole time. Like I loved her to death. But she would remind me to just breathe and to try to relax and that, you know, I had this and all the things. And then, of course, that helped me to remember to breathe and to not like tense up as bad. Because if you tense up, then it makes the contraction that much more worse. That helped me. And then also me just talking to myself and, you know, I was like, you know, God designed my body to do this. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He, you know, built my body for this. All this happened pretty quick. Like I was only in labor for probably like 5 hours. So my nurse that I started with, she was actually supposed to get off at 7, right? I was progressing really, really fast. I was over the back of the bed having contractions and I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel so much pressure. She checked me. This was like probably 6:30. She was like, oh, you're like a 6 or 7. And then probably like 15 minutes later, I was like, no, I feel like so much pressure. Like something is going on. And so she checked me again. She was like, oh, you're about 7 to 8. And then about 7 o'clock, they were doing shift change and she was like trying to introduce me to the new nurse that was coming on. I was in the middle of a contraction, so I don't remember anything that she was saying, but I was like, I feel like I gotta push. And so she checked me and she's like, oh, you know, not quite there yet. You're like at 8 or 9. So I was like progressing super fast and she was like, you know, I don't want to miss it, but if I hang around, it'll probably be a while. But if I go home, it's probably going to be like super quick. And I was like, you know, things can change so fast. I remember telling her that. She made like a lap around the labor and delivery unit and she came back in and I was already flipped over, ready to push. I had one more contraction after she left and I told them, I said, I said, I have got to push. When I told them that, they were like, okay. I was actually going to push like in the position that I was laboring in. But one of the nurses told me that she was like, you know, you can push like this and you can deliver like this. But if you do, you're going to have to stay like this for a while after you deliver. I said, oh, heck no. I'm not comfortable with that at all. So I flipped over on to my back, and at this point my body was pushing by itself. Like, I was sitting there telling them, like, I am not pushing. Like, this is just going down by itself. They were putting my legs up in the foot holders and stuff like that. And, like, at this hospital, they had the option of, like, the flat footboards, or they could bring out, like, the holster things, and you could sit your leg, like, your calves up in the things. And that hurt so bad during contractions. I was like, can I please just, like, press up against these, like, feet boards? That would feel so much better. And she was like, yeah, that's, totally fine, up to you. I started to push, and I kid you not, that is the most excruciating pain. Like, if you cannot labor and push inside of water, I highly recommend just getting the epidural. I was completely, like, out of it at this point. So I was pushing, and then, they were, like, letting me do it how I wanted to at first. And then all of a sudden, everybody is like, push, push, push. Once you get finished, take a deep breath, go back into it again. And I could not for the life of me figure out why everybody started to coach me on pushing. And I was just starting to feel, like, really overwhelmed. I was starting to feel like, okay, I can't do this. I was feeling like, oh my gosh, like, I don't even know how to push. She ended up coming out, and they laid her on top of me. And I mean, she was fine. She was totally fine. And I was doing skin to skin. And then, of course, I delivered the placenta just a few minutes later. Mind you, the whole labor and delivery process, I was a hot mess. I was a wreck. Every time I felt a gush come out of my body, I was calling the nurses in, asking them, like, is this amount of bleeding okay? Is this normal? So after I delivered the placenta, my bleeding picked up again. She was like, I'm not very happy with the amount of bleeding that's going on. So they had to give me a suppository to help my bleeding to stop. That wasn't really working. Like, they were sitting there having to, like, continuously massage my uterus, because as soon as they would stop massaging, it would go back soft, and then I would start gushing again. They gave me a suppository, and then when that wasn't working the way she wanted it to, they gave me a shot in the leg, and then they kept me on Pitocin for 24 hours after delivery. And if you've never had to be left on Pitocin after delivery, I highly don't recommend it unless you absolutely need it, because it's painful. It's like labor all over again. It took them a while to sit there and just massage my stuff, my junk, trying to get the bleeding to stop. So once they finally got it pretty well maintained, they did have to come in every 15 to 20 minutes to do the fundal massage again. If you've ever had that done, you know how bad that hurts, especially when you're in the labor and delivery unit. Now, when you get over to your recovery room, in your recovery unit, they're pretty light-handed with it, but labor and delivery is not. So I was super sore. So she did that every 15, 20 minutes, or if I felt a gush, I would call her in to check it because I was so paranoid. Finally, I was able to get up and go to the bathroom and kind of get cleaned up. I didn't get to take a shower down there, but I was able to get, cleaned up for the most part. The baby was great. She was 8 pounds, 6 ounces, and 21 inches long. So hers was a good size baby. Now, once we got into recovery, I was able to eat. That's pretty much my whole birth story this time. It was a very scary experience. I was actually supposed to get my tubes tied while I was in the hospital, but because of how traumatic everything was, I decided that I was just going to wait, because I just didn't feel like I could go through a spinal tap after what I had just dealt with. And I have my pre-op appointment coming up in just a few days. But it's just not safe anymore for me to have any more kids. We were already pretty much done after this baby, but that's another reason that we are really, really done, just health-wise. And two, I have a lot of health issues with my kidneys. I'm probably going to have to go through a kidney surgery this year, and I just need to be in the best shape possible for the kids that I already do have here. That is my birth story with Miss Billy Ann, my 5th baby. If you want to know how this birth compared to my last birth, since they were both unmedicated, I can definitely do a video for you on that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little get ready with me birth story time, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.